So, Amanda, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay. So my name is Amanda Pearson, and I'm the Vice President of Pride London Festival. I have been in London for 8 years, basically the whole time I've been transitioning. So I came out in 2013. During that time, after my business closed due to my transition and customers no longer wanting to do business with me, I returned to school and I studied psychology. I got a BA or an undergrad in psychology. I was accepted into a master's program, but due to lack of funds from being unemployed, I was not able to go to my master's program, so I had to let that opportunity pass by until later. I hopefully can get back and do it at some time. I don't know what else to say.
No, that's perfect. So you mentioned a few things that I'd like to kind of go back to.
Mm-hmm.
You're the first trans woman to be the Vice President of Pride. What has that been like for you?
It has been a very interesting experience. First of all, the reason I went on to the board of Pride London Festival is because over the years I was looking at the festival and how it dealt with trans issues, and I was not happy that we were doing as much as we could be doing for the trans community. Now, that was a little self-focused because that was the extent of my vision. So I joined the board. The issue with Pride became really a need for a change to shift the paradigm from what we had to something new. And so I joined the board to help facilitate that whole change in how we interact with the public and how we carry on our business. And then at the end of my first 6 months, we had the election for a new board, and I stepped up to be vice president just to ensure that I had a voice where I could see some of the things I would like to see done happen. And at that point, I also had my eyes opened and I realized that it was more than trans issues that we needed to address. And so this year has been kind of a whirlwind of activity. First few months was basically spent getting up to speed and recreating contact lists and things like that. Now that we've got that under our belt, we started a Pride London network, which we're going to use to feature local artists from the LGBT community and also some not so local artists from the LGBT community to promote them in their careers. But we're also going to use the opportunity to do more talks like the ones we're doing tonight so that we can reach out to the wider audience on the internet and hopefully begin the discussion that leads to substantial change in the community.
Very nice. And what are you currently working on?
I am currently working on a series of these talks that will be educational and address some of the more common myths in society. I'm also working on, within Pride, finding a way to give Pride London Festival a elevated presence within the London community so that we're seen as a non-profit organization as opposed to a festival planning party planner type organization. And the last thing, of course, we're always working on is fundraising.
Of course. Mm-hmm. So the goal really is to be more than just, and the festival is obviously important, but the goal is to be a year-round source of information and advocacy.
I often said that the festival lasts for 1 week, and what do we do for the other 51 weeks of the year? And I want to make sure that we fill up as many of those 51 weeks as we possibly can.
Very nice, very nice. So you mentioned that you had a business for 20 years?
No, the business was only 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
And that when you transitioned, you had clients that no longer wanted to use your services?
Yeah, the situation was very much as you transition, some of your physical attributes change, and it becomes more and more difficult to hide them from people. I did a pretty good job at first, wearing loosely fitting articles of clothing, not doing makeup. But eventually I got my ears pierced, which drew some attention. It's pretty hard to strip off nail polish without leaving some remnants, and I realized that I had to come out to my customers. There was also a problem that I had somebody who was actually going around and telling my customers that I was a transgender woman, so I thought it would be best that they heard it from me rather than hear the distorted version coming from another individual. So it all happened in the fall of 2014. And what happened was at the 1st of October, it just so happened I was seeing a lot of my customers over the 2-week period. So every customer I saw, I explained to them that I was a transgender woman, and that the next time they saw me, I would be presenting as my true self, as a woman. During those talks, I had some of the customers basically tell me I was never allowed to step foot in their business again. Other ones indicated that the amount of business I would get from them would be extremely limited. They underestimated that statement by a long shot. The long and the short of it is the ones who were very kind and said, oh, we're an accommodating workplace and it's not a problem and everything will be great, not a problem. But by the end of October, all of a sudden I had no phone calls, I had no work.
Wow.
And it happened so fast, it caught me off guard. So I had some outstanding bills that were still owed to me. Well, November went along and I still hadn't gotten any work and the bills weren't paid. So I was calling the customers who owed me money and they said, yeah, we'll get it to you. Well, December, I still didn't have the money and I still wasn't getting work. And I basically hung on as long as I could. And by May of 2015, I just said, I can't do this anymore. So actually May of 2015 is when I had my gender confirmation surgery. And at the same time, I just announced that I was closing the business because at that point it was obvious to me that I wasn't going to be able to maintain it. I didn't have a single call until about 2 years later, and then one of my customers who had a fire in their business and lost a lot of their computer equipment, networking, and business data, called me and asked me if I could help them resurrect it. But at that point I was heavy into my university course and I just basically apologized and said that the business is closed and I can't take that much time off from university. It would cost me thousands of dollars. And that was the interesting thing. Once people realized that I was presenting as women, they expected me to work for a lot less money. I actually have one customer who said to me that, women don't get paid as much as men, so you need to cut your hourly rate in half.
Wow.
He claimed he was joking, but it didn't feel like a joke.
That's not a joke.
Yeah.
That is, I can't imagine investing in a successful business for 15 years, and then because of transphobia, losing it. That's a very big sacrifice.
Well, I think it's part of the systemic problem we have in society. I know lots of trans women who have a good job and their companies are very accommodating. And so while they're transitioning, the company is actually adjusting and facilitating the transition. And those women keep their jobs and they go on to have long careers. But what's universally true is if you're a trans woman and you lose your job and you go back into the market looking for work, it's virtually impossible to find employment. Now, some people will say, well, I found employment, but these jobs that I have two post-secondary education degrees. I worked 20 years at Dow Chemical, I was the manager of the lab information systems. I had my computer consulting company, which was again a information consulting firm, where I traveled the world. And I'm applying, and I now have a BA in psychology. I'm applying for jobs, and I get a call for an interview, and as soon as they get the hint that I'm a transgender woman, the interviews are canceled or they're cut short, or I just never ever get a second interview. And for the number of times that this has happened to me, it's become really obvious that I think employers look at, if I bring in a trans woman, I have to make all these adjustments. I'll have upset employees who I'll have to basically browbeat into accepting this person. And they just make a subconscious decision that it's not worth it to them, and so I don't get hired.
I mean, this is a profound loss of talent.
Extremely. A local organization called the Trans Pulse Project did a study of trans people in southwestern Ontario, and it turns out that more than half of transgender people have a post-secondary education, and that would be an undergrad, master's, or PhD in some field. And yet we have over 70% unemployment in the trans community, according to the same survey that they did. So it's obvious that trans women are not being hired for work. And it is a problem because 70% is literally 10 times greater than the average unemployment rate for southwestern Ontario, which hovers between 6 and 7%.
Oh.
So
while the corporate world seems very friendly to the LGBTQ community, clearly some demographics they're completely neglecting.
Yes. It is easy. It's easy for a lot of people to find jobs at minimum wage, doing things like, working in a store. Although people who have employment opportunities where you interface with the public, they're kind of reticent about putting us in those public-facing jobs because now you get your customers complaining. So minimum wage jobs open up as a possibility, but there's such high competition right now for minimum wage jobs because of the unemployment situation. And the more educated you are, the less likely you are to be considered for a minimum wage job. It's almost a bias based on too much education.
Wow. Wow. So employment is clearly an issue.
Yes, for me, I haven't had a job in 8 years. Well, not since 2014, so that's 7 years.
And you want to work? It's just that.
Oh, I love working. I mean, I manage my own business. I would love to get into a job where I manage people and I make business decisions. I said before that I travel throughout the world. I handle jobs worth millions of dollars, and it's quite a blow to your self-esteem to think that now suddenly not only are you unemployable, but people don't trust you in these positions of decision-making positions. And that might be a combination of just like the glass ceiling for women and on top of being transgender, which is likely true since they seem to go hand in hand.
Wow. You're watching Let's Talk Trans. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors. So I would like to dive into your transition story.
Okay.
At what age did you know that you had been born in the wrong body? And what was that like for you?
Okay, well, I'm one of these people who knew at a very early age. Things were different for me when I was 4. I was being told I was one thing, but I didn't feel that way. And all I really knew about my life is that when it came time to play with people, I wasn't interested in playing with the boys. I didn't understand them. I didn't fit in with them. And it was pretty obvious that they were aware of the fact that I didn't fit in with them either. However, I did fit in with girls. However, because of, it was 1960s, I might as well kind of hint at my age, because of the social roles that females and males played, as a young boy, 4 years old, I shouldn't be playing house with my sisters. I shouldn't be playing with their dolls. I shouldn't be out skipping rope or hopscotching on the pavement. I should be out in the field pushing down other boys and pretend fighting and playing with my toy guns, etc. And it just didn't work for me. By the time I was 7, I actually started to say to myself, the problem is, it's not that I don't fit in. The problem is that I'm a girl, and I do fit in with the girls. And I don't fit in with the boys because I'm a girl.
You thought this at 7?
Yep.
Did you express it to your parents?
There wasn't a chance I was going to express it to my parents. My family is very, well, back then, being transgender was considered to be gay or lesbian. So my family tends to be on the homophobic side of the world. They have other discriminations that they practice, but definitely they were anti-trans and anti-homosexual. And also seeing how people who had come out were being treated in the public. It was still illegal at the time. I heard stories of many people who came out being taken to the Ontario Regional Centre, which was a mental asylum, where all kinds of terrible things, the story was all kinds of terrible things happened to them, and I knew I didn't want that to happen to me. So I had this sense that I had to hide it. So I did hide it, and not only did I have to hide it, but I realized that if I didn't do something, people would guess about my gender identity. So I had to start to try to ape male behavior. And so I would force myself to, and over the years I developed what I can call a universal translator. I would hear what was going on in the world, and then in my mind I would think about how I would want to respond to it, and then I would have to put it through the filter and turn it into the masculine way of responding. And so as a young person, I stuttered a fair bit, and I stammered, and I was shy in speaking because I couldn't say things at the same pace of a normal conversation because I had to do that extra filtering. And so that went on through, in the biggest way I dealt with it was by not having friends. Girls would no longer hang out with boys, and I didn't feel like a boy, so I couldn't hang out with the boys either. So at the school, I was always like the person who was standing alone on the playground because I just didn't know where I fit in. And that went through most of the grades, right up to about grades 7 and 8. And that's when boys and girls start to get interested in each other again. And so I was able to start making friends with girls. But the problem was, girls are interested in dating those who they perceive as a boy, and all I wanted was a friendship. Because the truth of the matter is I never wanted to date a girl. I only wanted to be friends with the girl. In my heart, who I really wanted to date was boys. But I couldn't bring myself to doing that because it just, maybe the homophobia was ingrained in me through my family because I was associated with them, I know there was a lot of self-loathing over my own gender identity. And so I just couldn't bring myself to come out as gay. And it didn't even seem right to me because, again, that means that I was pretending to be a male, and all I really wanted to do was just be me, the female that I knew myself to be.
This would have been so confusing.
It is, even trying to communicate it to people.
I couldn't imagine. This would have been so confusing, especially during that time.
Yeah. Well, and in high school it was problematic too, because I mean, a lot of people started to really focus on the fact that I wasn't dating, and then the rumors started that I was gay, and I would be asked frequently if I was gay, and it was always easy for me to answer because I never saw myself as gay. And the reason I didn't is because I knew I was a girl, so liking boys was heterosexual.
Ah.
And so, high school was kind of rough. I did date a couple times in high school, but never multiple dates. There were a couple girls I kind of, I liked a lot. And so when people said I was crushing out on them, I just let them go with that and not say anything. When I was hanging out with guys in high school, it was interesting because, of course, they had the 10 scale for rating women, and they had their boy talk, and I quickly became aware that guys just ogle women. So how do I survive in that? Because if I don't pay attention, that's going to perpetuate that gay stereotype I was falling under. So what I found was I liked the clothes. And so when girls were around me, I was admiring their shoes and their clothes and thinking about how I would look in them. And that satisfied the guys because I was staring at the girls. They just didn't realize I was staring at their clothes, not the girl.
They thought you were ogling them, but
yeah.
you're like, that's...
And so, in high school, I was perceived as being like a typical male, doing the things that irritate girls. But in essence, I wasn't doing it at all. I was trying to fit in and find a way to fit in without, becoming the target of harassment and hate. So
trying to survive high school.
Yeah. that was true. So that's basically my story until 55. I mean, I had intended to transition in my 20s, but again, social pressure. I got married. I was engaged twice, actually. The first engagement didn't work out because of discrimination, coincidentally. She had a Dutch background. I was Canadian. Her parents hated me because I was Canadian, and my parents hated her because she was Dutch. And so, I mean, that puts so much pressure on a marriage when your families isolate you, and it just looked like a losing situation. So the next girl I met, I was actually quite enamored with her. I loved her in so many ways, probably not the way you should love somebody if you marry them. However, I thought I could make it work. So we got married, and I was married for 25 years. I have 3 kids. But when I was 55, it became obvious that we were both unhappy, and it just seemed so unfair to continue in a marriage where neither one of us were happy. So I asked for a separation. And then after asking for a separation, I just asked myself the simple question, what do I need to do to carry on with my life? Because I knew being male was not going to be something that would be fulfilling for me. And so that left me with the 2 options. One was to kill myself, and the other was to transition and present the female self to the world. And I thought, well, I can always try going the route of transitioning and showing the world that I'm truly female, because if that doesn't work out, the other option is still available to me. And thankfully, transitioning has been what I needed. I'm happy now. Even with all the terrible things that happened in my life, I'm still happier than I've ever been in my life, because now I'm me, and the world sees me for who I am. And I don't particularly care one way or the other if they like me or not. I'm being authentic, and I can live my life the way I feel comfortable.
I think that takes so much courage. And when you lost a lot to live an authentic life and you sacrificed it. And
right. I mean, I basically have no relationship with my family at this point. My mother was embarrassed and ashamed and would say terrible things to me, including "I wish you were dead" and all kinds of things along that line. And as your previous guest said, you know, they would weaponize things. They weaponized my old name, they weaponized my new name, and even when I changed my name a second time to Amanda, which I thought was really female, they managed to weaponize Amanda just the same way. So eventually I came to the conclusion, and in 2015 I broke off even trying to communicate with my family because it just wasn't a rewarding relationship. And I really haven't spoken to most of my family for the 6 years since. I have 2 sisters that I can talk to, and because they talk to me, they've been isolated by my family. I have 2 other sisters who probably would talk to me, but they're afraid of going through the same social isolation by the members of the family who are transphobic. So basically, I get to talk to 2 sisters periodically. My children have been wonderful. They have stayed with me through my whole journey.
That's good.
And in fact, I just had my son's birthday yesterday at my place, so during COVID. But so it's really nice that my kids have, and I find young people are much better at accepting who I am. The university setting was just so incredible for me because the students all being between 18 and 24, the vast majority of them, they just accepted me, and the girls, I was just another girl.
That's
and
wonderful.
even the guys, I never got asked out on dates probably because of my age, or maybe a little bit because I was trans. But the guys, they were polite to me. They didn't call me names. There was no insults, etc. Now there were a few, but the vast majority of the people were quite nice.
That is a relief to hear. The younger generation isn't as nasty.
Yes. Well, there's a few of them that can be pretty nasty, but the majority of them are not.
Yeah. Have you experienced, obviously you've mentioned employment has been an issue. What is it like for you navigating going out in public as a trans woman and safety?
Well, there's 2 aspects to going out in the public as a woman. First of all, for a lot of men, I have a feminized body. And so I face the same challenges that cisgender women face in going out in public. There are a lot of places I can't go to. Like for instance, tonight after this, I'm uncomfortable even waiting for a bus when it's after dark, because I have been approached by men who are looking for a short-term relationship very frequently, and they become very assertive in their demands that I participate. And I'm not in the same position I once was. I can't defend myself against these attacks. And so, I try to avoid activities that occur after sunset unless I'm in a group. And then there's also the fact that I am transgender, so for some men that is a fetish, and they are very aggressive in the way they approach me with a feminized body. And of course, there are a lot of men who probably because it's later at night and they've been drinking, think that they're going to solve the world's problem by harassing me and potentially attacking me. So I've had to learn how to defend myself much the same as any other woman.
You're watching Let's Talk Trans. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
I volunteered with Pride just as a volunteer in the beer garden. I was scheduled at a few different events throughout the week and throughout the weekend in the park, and I was just a volunteer at the time, and that was my first year that I came out and volunteered with Pride, and I realized how much just one event brought the community together, how much of an impact in London that having all the different Pride was there for people. You saw
Alexa, replay the song, please.
That command is not supported right now.
Rude. Alexa, replay song.
That command is not supported right now.
So you mentioned safety has been an issue. You're not comfortable, being out at night, that sort of thing, getting a lot of aggressive, unwanted attention. In what ways have you had to change your behavior to ensure your safety?
Well, first of all, I stick to crowded areas. So I'm never caught alone because I've been harassed in the middle of the day just walking down the street. I also, if it is dark, I stay in well-lit areas where there are lots of people. And if that can't happen, well, I get out of there as quickly as I can. Taxis are something I typically can't afford. But if I'm in an isolated spot and there's not a lot of people around, I'll call a taxi to get out of there as quickly as possible. I also carry a very bright flashlight that when I turn it on, the light is bright enough to temporarily blind somebody. So if I am attacked, I can shine this light in their face, and hopefully that gives me the opportunity to get away. And coincidentally, the front edge of the flashlight has a serrated edge. So if I have to fight, I have something I can hit them with that will mark them. So that they're easier to identify if the police take action. That's been another problem I've had, is the police haven't always taken attacks on me seriously.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure.
Only if you're comfortable.
I'm comfortable. Okay, so in 2015, it was August, and I was walking home from the grocery store, and I had a bunch of groceries with me. As I was walking along, this man said hi to me, and I guess I was naive, and I looked over and smiled and said hi back and just kept going. I got into my apartment. I went up to my floor. I was at my apartment door, putting the key in the lock. I just unlocked the door, and that man came up behind me and grabbed me and started to push me into the apartment. He was trying to disrobe me, or at least get his hands under my clothes. He was making really bizarre noises. I guess he thought they were romantic. And I was saying no and pushing him away, and finally I just gave him the biggest push I could give him. He stumbled backwards out of my apartment. I slammed the door and I locked it. I called the police and I told them what had happened, and he was still outside my door, and they said they would get an officer to respond to me. An officer showed up 13 hours later.
Wow.
And he came in, and I invited him into the apartment, and he started to look around my apartment. I go, "Are you here to search my place?" Or because he's not here, thinking that he thought I might be still in danger. I don't know why he was searching my apartment. I said, "Would you like to sit down? Can I get a coffee and we can talk?" And he says, "No, I'm not allowed to sit down." And I said, "Okay." So he started to ask me questions. I told him what had happened, and I noticed that he wasn't writing things down. And then he put his book away and his pencil, and he looked at me and he says, "Well, it wasn't a real sexual assault, was it? People like you can't be sexually assaulted." And that was it. It was over and done with. Nothing ever came from it.
He said people like you can't be sexually assaulted?
Yes.
I mean, how do you even respond to that?
There is no way to respond. I mean, he's the police. I had another situation on a bus where somebody hit me in the back of the head with an object and then ran off the bus. In that case, I was sitting by the rear exit on the bus, and there was a security camera just up here, so the person who hit me the security camera was fixed on the door, so the person hit me as they were going out the door, so the whole thing had to be on tape. So I told the bus driver what had happened. Well, first of all, I swore because somebody hit me, and after the stars cleared, I went up and told the bus driver what happened. He says, yeah, I heard the ruckus back there. And I said, well, one of the passengers described the person to me. And the bus driver says, well, call the office when you get off and ask them to grab the security tape, and you should call the police. So I did both of those. The bus office said that they would put the security tape aside and keep it for when the police came to pick it up. The police officer, I have to think back to how this went. So the police officer who came, he asked me the story, and I told him what the passenger had told me, and the description of the person who hit me. And the police officer says, fine, I will go and I will check on that tape and I'll get back to you. Well, 3 weeks went by and I never heard from him, and he wasn't returning my calls. And finally he returned my calls and he says, oh, I've been on vacation. And he says, but I've picked up the tape and it doesn't really show anything at all. And I said, well, I called the bus station this morning to ask if you had been in to pick up the tape because I hadn't heard back from you. And they say the tape is still sitting on the desk, that you haven't been in to pick it up. So unless it happened in like the last 30 minutes, you haven't picked up that tape. He says, yeah, right, well, I'm picking up the tape and I'll get back to you. So I waited, and the attack took place near the end of October, and now most of November is gone. It got into December, the police officer still wasn't calling me. And finally in January, he called me and he says, I looked at the tape and there's nothing on the tape. I can't identify the person. I can see a person hit you, but I can't identify the person. And I said, oh, well, thank you. So where do we go from here? And he says, well, it's pretty hard to investigate this. And he hung up, and I went, I called the bus station and I asked them if the tape had been picked up. And they said, no, the tape's still sitting here. We're waiting for somebody to pick up the tape. And so I called the police station, and I was talking to a female officer trying to explain what had happened, and I'd like to talk to a supervisor because it's obvious this police officer isn't going to investigate this crime. Well, she finally clocked me as being a transgender woman, and she started to misgender me. And so finally, she did it a couple times, and finally I said, excuse me, but I'm a female. Would you please use female pronouns when you refer to me? 17 more times she misgendered me on purpose. And so, I mean, I wasn't even going to get any joy in calling the police and filing a complaint. So I did know the diversity officer of the day, and I called her and I told her what was going on, and she says, well, I have a talk to his sergeant. I'll see what I can do, but quite frankly, don't expect a lot to happen. She says, I'm sorry, I know that's not what you want to hear, but just don't expect a lot to happen. And nothing ever did happen from it. So some really bad experiences with the police. Now, I was lucky. Whatever the person hit me with, I saw stars, but I didn't have a concussion. I wasn't bleeding. I guess my life wasn't in jeopardy, but that could have gone very differently. And knowing that the police took both of those instances and even created a third instance out of it, that showed a disrespect for me because of my gender identity. I was pretty upset, and for a long time I had a lot of hard feelings towards the police. Now, through my position as the Vice President of Pride London Festival, we're talking to the police to try to raise awareness of what's going on. And this is one of the things I hope we can address, is what do the police do about those few individual officers who treat trans women this way? Because in my opinion, they can't be allowed to stay on the force. They're there to protect me as much as they are anybody else, and they fail at doing that job because of their prejudices.
So hopefully there can be some progress.
I'm hoping so. I mean, the London police seem to be very open in wanting to talk to us. But again, my favorite saying is, it's not who you say you are, it's what you do that defines you. So I'm looking for action. I think the day and age of words is long behind us. It's time for people to take action and actually follow through with who they say they are.
Definitely. Yeah. I know that who's entitled to protection, who is a victim that people can identify with. All of these things factor in when you're trying to get help.
The one thing that has never left my mind, if I had been somebody's daughter or even another police officer's daughter and had a man attack me that way at my door, do you think the outcome would have been the same?
Definitely not.
And I think they would have moved heaven and earth to get that man and charge him.
What is it like for you dating as a trans woman?
Well, the interesting thing is I have been on some dates, but what I typically find that happens is I'm upfront with men. So as soon as they ask me out on a date, I don't want to get into some place and then have a person make a scene or worse yet attack me. So I'm very upfront and I tell them who I am. So probably the majority of men just go, oh, thanks, but no thanks, and they leave. In a lot of ways, I respect them more than the other men, because at least they're honest and they say, yeah, this isn't for me. I'm really, I'm just can't do this. And I appreciate that honesty, because I mean, it hurts with the way the other men treat you. And so another group of men, they will get extremely angry because they say that I'm tricking them or fooling them, or I've got some evil intent in interfacing with them when it was them who approached me. And so the anger has taught me that it's really a good idea to tell them when it's being done over the internet or over the phone, because that way, even when they get mad, they can't come and hurt me.
So you're telling them that you're a trans woman at the very beginning, and their reaction is anger?
Yep.
But you didn't trick them?
Nope.
So the anger is quite rational.
Normally the way I do it is when somebody calls me or contacts me over a dating app, I will talk to them for a half a dozen to a dozen text messages. Because what I want to do is I want to know, is this person a person I'm even interested in? Because I just don't want to out myself to people who I'm never going to see, because they just don't interest me. So I wait the dozen texts, and I guess it's in that exchange of 12 snippets of a conversation that, because I haven't told them within the first text, that they're angry and they feel that I'm trying to trick them into it, even though it was me who volunteered the information I was transgender. So the last third, which is really interesting, is because some men, especially on dating websites, they try to present themselves like they're falling in love with you and want to, you're just the hottest thing on earth, and they're so excited to be able to date you. Just, over the top, way too fast in the relationship to be saying this kind of stuff.
They're love bombing you.
Yes. And then as soon as I tell them I'm transgender, all of a sudden it changes from love bombing to hypersexualized talk and rude propositions. And I become a sex object or a sex toy, not a woman any longer. Now, I did leave out one group, and that's the catfish, the people who just try to swindle you. And I've had lots of people try to take me for thousands of dollars, and I just say no. My favorite one is where they e-transfer you a couple $1,000. And if you cash it, then what they do is they say, well, you need to send that money on to somebody for me. And I go, well, why didn't you just send it to him in the first place? And it goes back and forth. But anyways, the swindle is they get you to cash it and send it on to somebody, and then they claim it was a fraudulent e-transfer, and they get the money back from you. So if they send you $2,000, you're going to be out $2,000.
You've had more than one person do this?
Oh,
or try to do this?
Try to do this, yeah. And I mean, it's and they're so stupid because I think somebody, someplace has produced a script that they all subscribe to, because it always goes the same thing. There's some minor variations, but it's always exactly the same script. And yeah, so these people try to swindle not just me, but any woman on the internet. Yeah, so and again, the police aren't interested in doing anything about these swindles because the person could be in Timbuktu.
Well, exactly.
And so how do they catch a person? Well, I've learned a little trick. I had somebody show me how you can actually, when they send you their cell phone number, you can type it in, and not only does it tell you where the cell phone is registered, but it'll tell you the exact location where the cell phone is right now. So the police really wanted to, they could track these people down just simply by the cell phone number. And so I believe the app was created for women who thought their husbands were cheating. But now half a dozen times I've been very fortunate. I've had men who go ahead and take me out on a date, and again the date goes really well, and it usually ends with a kiss or maybe holding hands, and the person saying to me that they'll call me and we'll go out again, but they don't.
Oh.
So and what happens is with these guys, I was able to talk to a few of them. They go back and they're talking to friends and family, and they say, I've met this really wonderful woman. But during the conversation, they say, she's a trans woman. And then all of a sudden they start to get hit with, are you gay? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're into men now? And even though the person says, well, not a man, a woman, all of a sudden their sexuality is questioned. And so they back away because the masculine image is very fragile, and any crack in it causes a man to lose status among his friends. So dating a trans woman and being perceived as potentially a homosexual is too much of a hit on their masculinity for them to go forward.
That's too taboo.
Yeah. So I'm still waiting for the right man to come along, whether it's Henry Cavill or Ryan Reynolds. I'm not picky.
Superman. Oh, yes. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for this interview. It has been very, very interesting. And
well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
My pleasure.
Okay.